In this video, I'm going to talk about what I'm looking for when I grade the adventure game projects. I know it's a little amorphous because I don't want to tell people, oh, well, if you do this, you get 10 points, and you get that, you get 10 points, because then people just rush to do that and they make a garbage game that technically checks off all the boxes. And what I'm trying to do is kind of encourage creativity here. But let's take a look at the things that I generally look for that I think of as being indicators of a good game. So the map, for one thing, the number of things that you have in the world. If you only have 10 things in your game, well, that's kind of a red flag. Maybe there's some amazing puzzles with just those 10 things, but the odds are against it. So I'm looking for like the size of the world, the size of the map, and then within the map, the quality of the writing and the quality of the layout. Like, does the layout of the place make sense? Like, do you have to walk through the captain's bedroom to get to the torpedo bay? That doesn't make sense, right? So I'm looking for just kind of, is your world kind of logically laid out, right? So now let's take a look at this map right here. This is from that Terezin 47 game where you're exploring the abandoned factory in 1947 in Terezin, Czechoslovakia. And so this, I'd say, if you made a map like that's about that size, that's a great size map. Like, it's not too big, it's not too small. There's plenty for the player to explore there. And most of these rooms have something in them that the player needs, or there's something that the player needs to interact with. So just because you have an enormous map doesn't mean that the map is necessarily good. But you're kind of, we're looking for something that has, there's a quality to it. The locations have something for the player to do, or they have items that the player needs, and there's a reason to explore the map, and the rooms are not just noise. All right, what else? The writing. The writing is like the first thing that hits you, or hits me, when I open up one of these games. And what I'm looking for is, did you follow the rules that were spelled out in that text adventure writing video where I spent about 20 minutes explaining the unique writing style that these games have? So let's revisit those rules. So locations, room names, they are proper nouns and get capital letters. So Hall of Mists, capital H, capital M. Twisty Passage, capital T, capital P. But object names are lowercase. Wrench, brass lamp, torch, rusting sword, those are not proper nouns. Those do not get capitalized. In the game, if it says there's a wrench here and the wrench is capitalized, that just looks wrong. Like, you wouldn't do that if you were writing. So why would the game look like that when you play it? So treat the room names like they are proper nouns. Object names are not proper nouns. They get lowercase. All right. So what else am I looking for? So if I start up the game and I immediately see that like the object names don't follow those rules, like that's like a big red flag. Hey, like, we weren't paying attention back when I was trying to lay the groundwork for this unit. And there's dogs jumping all over the place. All right. Sorry, I just live in a house full of dogs. Functions. What is there to do in your game? How much depth does your world have, or is it just the map? If it's just a map and the player has nothing to do, like that's an F, right? There's no work there. So what I'm looking for is functions and sentences. The more functions, the better. Events, you may not have that many of them, maybe just a couple to check for things, to calculate a score, run down a battery, check for a win condition, check to see if the player's got everything they need. Generally, you don't have more than a handful of events, but you will probably have lots of sentences. So if I open up your project file and there aren't a lot of sentences there, then that means like, well, what did you do? Beyond making the map, how much work went into this thing? So remember that little space station game where you had to go figure out that the radio was broken, get the spacesuit, go to the science station, get the jar of salt, find the code, get the board, go back to the command center, kill the slug, put the comm board in the slot, and then use the radio. This is the function list for that game. There's about 30 functions in here. Now, some of these are just the built-in ones, because you get a couple just in every project, but there's a fair amount there's a lot of stuff here. Because because there's a lot of interactivity in that small world, or in that small, even in that relatively small map of maybe 10, 12 rooms, something. There's a fair number of objects, and those objects are require interactiveness, or you can interact with them. And that interactivity means that there are functions. So if I open up a project and I just don't see many functions, it's like, well, there's just not a lot of work in this thing. There's not a lot of depth to this project. So, but if I see a lot of functions, then I'm like, oh, wow, okay, so somebody put in a lot of work, and that's great. That means that there's, they've invested a lot of time, not only designing out the space, but then adding that layer of interactivity using the functions. Now, another thing that I'm looking for is your level of independence. Now, I'm always happy to help people, and I like, I'm just, it's part of my job, and I am always happy to help people kind of make something interesting and answer questions and troubleshoot a bug that pops up. And that's not what I'm talking about here. So if you've kind of started writing some code and it's not working, and I come by and I help you fix your problem, that's fine. That's great. That's my job. However, if your game was developed something like this. Well, now I want the door to open when I push the switch. Okay, did you let me show you how to do that. Okay, now when the door is open, I want this to happen. Okay, let me show you how to do that. If I had to do all of your coding for you, and you were just completely dependent on me to get your project out the door, and you turned me into your personal code person, your personal coder, that doesn't count. Right? I'm expecting you to figure out the rules of the syntax. I'm expecting you to learn how functions and events and sentences all work. And I'm happy to give people a freebie every now and then, and I'm happy to help people solve interesting things that may not be covered in tutorials. But if you're the only reason your project has any code in it is because I stood next to you and told you what to type, that counts against you. That doesn't count. So. And that's kind of a vague area that's hard to put in, quantify in a rubric, but general level of independence, right? I'm expecting, did you try to solve your own problems before you came to me, or did you just rely on me to solve all your problems? That's really what it's going for. It's like, did you make a good faith effort to figure this out before you called me in? So that's what I'm looking for there. Other stuff. The hint system and a scoring system. So I expect your game to have a help system. These games are hard, and the player will get stuck. So you should provide a help system, and there are many ways to do that. I have provided 2 videos on how to provide a help system. So make sure you watch that and put a help system in your game. A scoring system. A scoring system is there. That's like the progress bar for the player. There are at least 2 ways I can think of to do a scoring system, both of which I covered in my videos on scoring systems. So make sure your game has a scoring system. What else? Importantly, very, very importantly, your game needs a walkthrough. I am not going to know how to play your game. I don't have time to sit down and play your game as if I were a player who had purchased this game. I don't have time to sit down and draw out all the boxes, catalog all the objects, try to figure out what objects are going to get me past what barriers. I need a walkthrough. And there's a video on how to add a walkthrough to your game. And if you understand how to make a walkthrough, you will save yourself a ton of time, right, when you go to test your game. So not only does it help me, but it helps you as well. On the testing tab for your project, you should have something like this: the list of commands that the player needs to type to beat the game. If this isn't there, I am not grading your project. I need this walkthrough in order to test your game. And I will test your game. So if you have a whole bunch of commands here and I run it in your game and they don't work, then there's a problem there. And your grading is on hold until you figure that out. What else? You need a title screen. So the whole purpose of this is to get our adventure game out onto the Apple II. And in order to do that, I've added the ability to put a slick title screen in black and white. So you need to watch the video on how to make an Apple II title screen. It's a 280 by 192 bitmap, black and white. Make sure that it's not just a picture. It's the picture, a title, your name. I know my example here doesn't have my name on it. And then even better, press any key to continue down at the bottom. So I want to see that your title screen is, well, okay, I found a thing on Google and I just threw it through the utility. No, I want to see that you invested some time actually making a title screen that has some, that's more than just some clip art from Google Images. I want to see the title of the game. I want to see your name and press any key to continue. Finally, if you got all that done, did your game actually make it out onto the Apple II hardware? If that's when we finally kind of can call this stuff done. That's the final benchmark of success there. We're able to take your game, build it, and actually throw it on that Apple II and get it to work. If your game is too big to fit on an Apple II, which sometimes happens, we can probably get it running on a PC under DOS. But did we get your game onto some retro hardware? That was the whole point of this, was to write a retro game. So if nothing, if your game never got turned in and never got put on retro hardware, that's not good either, and that I might count that against you. So, but if your game was good enough and we got all the bugs fixed and you got the fun experience of putting it out on the old machine, that's cool. That's great. That's the payoff. That's the fun. So, so let's just recap here. I'm looking at the quality of the map and the writing in that map. I want to see that you followed in that map all of the rules that I laid out in those videos about punctuation, grammar, spelling. Oh, make sure you spell check your project. Absolutely. There's a whole video on how to spell check your project. So quality of the writing. Are the rules of capitalization followed? Are the exits listed? How much is in the world generally? Did you just phone this thing in 5 minutes, or did you spend a lot of time designing out this world? How many functions are in this game? Are there any events in this game? How much interactivity is really there, or is it just a map? And then general playability, I didn't really talk about this before, but if you have commands, do those commands make sense, right? Do I, if I have to go north, east, perform an exorcism on the demon, like how would I know that I could do that as a player? Like, are the commands that the player has to type things that as somebody who's new to your game or not the author of your game, would I know to type those things? Like, is your game generally playable? Or does it rely on sentence constructs or verbs that the player would never think to type? Do you have the help system, the scoring system, the title screen, all that stuff? But really what I'm going for here is how much work, how much work did you put into this project? If I open this thing up and it just kind of has that feeling of, oh, this is somebody that just dragged out the design process and then they phoned in the map and then they just they put in one tutorial where they made a door work. That's not going to be a very good grade. So what I'm looking for is, a reasonable map about the size I showed you, plenty of functions, logical commands, the help system, the score system, the title screen. And if you've done all that, then relax and pat yourself on the back and enjoy your game, and we'll get it running on the retro hardware, and you'll get to see the fruits of your labor. So that's what I'm going for there. And if at any point you have questions, just email me. If you don't feel like you're going to hit this target, if there's problems, contact me, contact Trey. We're here to help. This is not meant to be this project is not meant to be an ambush. We're doing everything we possibly can to support people, whether you're in class or whether you're remote. And that part of this video is I just want people to understand what the expectations are, because eventually, this is a class, this is a big project, it will get graded. And I want people to understand how the grading process works. So if you have any questions about that, you're not sure if you're on track, what you need to do to get on track, just ask us. Say, I'd like to conference with us, email with us. I'd like to get some feedback. Can I get some feedback on, I just want to make sure this is okay. Can you double check this? Those are great phrases for starting that conversation. So there you go. That's what I'm looking for when I grade your projects.